This book is very special, and not only because it contains the personal letters of Tolkien to his children, but because its content is packed with Christmas lore and spectacular drawings by his own hand, including envelopes and even stamps made for the purpose of engaging his children and creating the illusion of realism. If you wish to learn more about this beautiful book and about the context around it, stay tuned. Welcome to biblioCultist, where I review books that I find interesting in the topics of religion, philosophy, history, and fiction. Please remember to subscribe to the channel, click the bell for notifications, like the video, share the video, comment on the video. Doing these things really helps my channel out, and I really appreciate it for those that actually already do these things. It permits the channel to grow organically, and our love of books can spread and engage more people. And even if only 10% of the books that I review here are purchased and read, I think it's a good achievement. I'll also put my X account below and also the link to my Ko-Fi where you can donate and also check out my merch store. In this episode, I'm going over Letters from Father Christmas by J.R.R. Tolkien. The edition that I have is from HarperCollins 2020. It's actually a very nice edition because it is a hardcover, but it has all the drawings and the original letters from Tolkien and then a transcription of them on the side. So you can read the actual letter and you can also read the transcription on the side if you can't read the handwriting. I was able to read the handwriting perfectly, but for some people it may be difficult, so you can read both. You can also see the drawings and all the beautiful art that he created around this character. So it really is a wonderful edition, and I assume you have soft covers as well, and they shouldn't be too expensive. So find whichever edition you can and enjoy the quality and the content. Just make sure that the one you get has the original letters like this edition. So one thing that stands out to me about this book is the fact that Tolkien wanted to establish a direct communication with his children. It seems more like a surreptitious way of communicating than simply sitting with them or playing with them as a parent. By being able to have his own characters and these mythical creatures communicate with them, it allows him some flexibility, and I think it's a wonderful concept. And obviously, being Tolkien, he utilizes lore and fantasy to achieve his goal. It is a very playful thing to do, obviously, for such a busy man to do. I mean, he was a professor and he began his writing career, and obviously that would make him even busier. So it really shows a very tender, creative personality. And as a Tolkien fan, this is a wonderful dimension that I was not aware of. Obviously, to make these stories credible, he positions Father Christmas in his usual North Pole location and then proceeds to move him through Northern Europe and the British Isles, exclusively in his letters, obviously because of the context. But by doing so, he's also making it a particular form of European folklore. And that's really what the whole dynamic of Father Christmas and Santa Claus is really all about. I am aware of the origin of what we would call consumerist Christmas, the whole dynamic of Santa Claus as a method to sell products and engage the economy into a frenzy of purchases and all the other madness that is related to this dynamic. But the truth of the matter is that there is such a thing as a background to this that is not commercial. And a lot of it has to do with the real St. Nicholas and also a lot of additional lore, including Woden himself, which I've always found to be interesting. So it is really a consummation of a lot of European and Northern European myth that has combined with Christian tradition and emerged in the way that we know it today, with the unfortunate injection of commercialism. But even if you remove that later edition, you still would have something quite recognizable. And I think this book gives you that perspective because it is devoid of the commercialism, even though it still contains some of the aspects of gifting, but without the vulgar component that we know today. I love what he did in this regard by explaining this to his children, by actually giving his children some background of this tradition. And I'll read a quote to exemplify it. Well, my dears, there's lots more I should say about my green brother and my father, old grandfather Yule, and why we were both called Nicholas after the saint, whose day is December 6th. He used to give secret presents, sometimes throwing purses of money through the window. But I must hurry away. I am late already, and I am afraid you may not get this in time. Kisses to you all, Father Nicholas Christmas. So as you can see there, he incorporated the old myths of Northern Europe into the story and introduced St. Nicholas into it as well. So he did a very nice job to present the tradition to the children without giving a whole lecture about it. But I think it's a very cool way of explaining the story. Now, the polar bear character is quite awesome because he involves him not only within the letters as Santa's helper, etc., but also because he uses the character to invent a writing system that he calls Arctic. And also it allows a third party to be involved in the story that is somewhat of an incompetent or kind of a funny, childlike character. And his commentary on Father Christmas's letters is actually a very entertaining aspect of the dynamic. Also, I find interesting the polar bear for the commercial reason because I actually always thought that the polar bear association with Christmas, which makes sense, North Pole, polar bears, I mean, I get it. But I thought it was a purely modern invention and it was associated with a certain beverage brand and its connection to Christmas. But I don't know, it could be that it's related to not necessarily Tolkien's letters because they were private, but maybe something that they're both deriving it from, a particular form of this myth. Because the bear that shows up in commercials is very similar in attitude and personality than the polar bear in these letters. So there has to be some kind of source. I just don't know what it is. If anybody knows, put it in the comments. I'll be very interested to find out. Now, what Tolkien does by adding conflict to his stories, goblins and gnomes and their wrangling back and forth, is fascinating for a couple of reasons. One, because it gives it a Lord of the Rings feel. It also can pragmatically serve as a way to explain why certain Christmases are not going to be as exciting and packed with gifts as others, because it gives you a way of explaining away the situation. The toys got lost or destroyed or whatever. But I also think there is a premonition because we're talking about the early years prior to World War II. And as the war becomes a reality, it seems to be almost a reflection of the things that were happening prior in his older letters. And even the dynamics of why it was happening can be seen allegorically. Now, again, like I always say, Tolkien hates allegory, so I don't want to do that to his letters. But it's difficult not to see a connection, at least historically speaking. A few of the archaeological elements in the story, the exploration of ancient times within the myth, as he kept developing it by introducing this very interesting component, it allows the story of man himself and his relationship to these creatures and this lore to become significant. And it gives a glimpse into the worldview of the author, his particular anthropology. You know, you see this in the Silmarillion and obviously in all the other related works. But some of it, you can see it already in these letters. And of course, highly simplified within a very personal context. Because the letters are not only lore about Father Christmas, etc., but they're also very personal letters to his children. So a lot of it is about the relationship of Father Christmas to Tolkien's children. Once the Second World War kicks off, you can see some of the heaviness being reflected in the letters. It becomes sad, melancholic. Also, there's a component of the desire to help, to teach his children that they should be charitable to those that have lost their homes or lost family members. And of course, a lot of this touched Tolkien himself directly, but you can see him using his mythos to teach lessons. And again, that is very valuable. And when your children, if you have any, read it, they will derive a similar benefit. They will understand certain things, that maybe see things around their lives and relate. Also, as you read the letters, as each of his children grew older, you can feel the disappointment, the real tragedy that a parent lives through as their offspring grow out of the childlike innocence that makes these letters such a price. And as a parent, I can say that this aspect weighed heavy on me as I finished the book. It left me a bittersweet taste because I can actually understand how he feels, and it's difficult to explain for someone who doesn't have children. It is tragic and beautiful simultaneously, but it is the kind of experience and feeling that is not very pleasant for a parent to realize. Part of life, but it is still a part of life that is not that enjoyable for those of us that have to go through it. Children, on the other hand, they're going to be fine with it because the heaviness is completely out of the story. They're just going to see the Father Christmas is communicating in a particular way, and as it winds down, they'll notice the moving on aspect of the story. But as a parent, it is rougher. Nonetheless, the book is absolutely beautiful. It is a very simple read. Obviously, it's meant for children, and it was meant as a love letter that lasted for almost 17 years. So it is a wonderful way of knowing Tolkien as a person, and also I think it could inspire you to be a better parent or a better brother or a better cousin. In other words, any one of you who has children that are related to you in some way, even if they're not your children, this dynamic shows a beautiful way of engaging them. And I think it's a great lesson to learn. And also the stories themselves are very entertaining and very creative. So there's a lot of things you can derive from the book, and I highly recommend it to have it in your collection, especially if you're a big Tolkien fan like I am. So if you want to know more about the real Father Christmas, this is a way of knowing that secret, knowing the inner workings of that world. So hopefully you enjoyed this short review. Please remember to subscribe to the channel, click the bell for notifications, like the video, share the video, and comment on the video. Thank you for being with me. See you next time.